The Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy. I'm someone who did not grow up playing these games, so I got the pleasure of playing them recently in the Trilogy pack on the Nintendo Switch. Rather than a review, which would be very difficult since each case is very different and each game has its own strengths and weaknesses, I figured I would just go ahead and rank each case in order from least good to the best. This is all my opinion, of course, and I do want to start by saying that no case in this trilogy was bad. I actually enjoyed all of them, at least in some way or another. To avoid any confusion, I'm going to say the name of the case, the game that the case is from, and the case number in that game. So here we go, this is my video. All 14 Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy cases ranked. At number 14, we have The Stolen Turnabout. Game 3, Case 2. Ace Attorney 3 was an amazing game with epic cases and great storytelling. However, I view this case to be a stain on the game as a whole. While I loved the return of Adrian Andrews, a lot of this case just felt like a slog and like I was going nowhere for no reason. I like the locales for the most part, but I think my biggest issue with this case was that I did not want to defend the defendant. The way Ron wouldn't finish his sentences and constantly babbled to himself and constantly said that he was masked and masked, whether that was true or not, was just plain annoying. I found myself more frustrated over my defendant more so than not, and in the long run, that spoiled this case for me, at least compared to other cases. The case is still fun, of course, because none of the cases in the Ace Attorney trilogy aren't, but this one is definitely my least favorite. At number 13, we have Turnabout Big Top. Game 2, Case 3. I actually had a really fun time putting this case together. I know that this case gets a lot of hate from the Ace Attorney fanbase. However, I thought it was quite entertaining. My issues with it lie in things that I haven't heard other people complain about. Those two big issues being the music that plays every time you talk to one of these characters in the circus, specifically the puppet guy and the clown, and the other thing would be every time I had to talk to the clown. The way he would constantly make jokes instead of talking about what I'm trying to ask him about was so annoying and kind of out of character considering the motives of each character. Other than that, I had a good time with this case. I especially liked cross-examining the puppet, but again, I can see why people disliked this case in comparison to other cases. A lot of the characters in this case kind of go out of their way to just not help you, and beat around every question that you ask of them, including your own defendant. At number 12, we have The Recipe for Turnabout. Game 3, Case 3. Now, this was another case that had me really confused with how it made me do all these things and seemingly be getting nowhere while doing so, especially when talking to the old man. Honestly, this case probably would have ranked worse on this list if it wasn't for how fun the characters are. The restaurant owner was hilarious to me, and even the old man had me laughing at times, as annoying as he could be. The music was also very fun every time the restaurant owner entered the room, and the dialogue in this case is great. Now, my issue with this case lies in the villain. You expect me to believe that people actually fell for him pretending to be Phoenix Wright just because they had a similar hairstyle? That he got into court and pretended to be a defense lawyer in front of everybody in the room, including the judge who knows Phoenix well enough at this point. I just don't believe it. I don't buy that he wore a fake badge and they thought it was a real badge even though it was made out of paper. On top of this, every time the villain was interrogated or cross-examined, it was so annoying because his character was kind of flat. I mean, all his personality trait was the way he talked, which is done over text, so it doesn't even have that much of an impact. All in all, he was the weakest part of this case, and that brought this case down. The side story with the car accident chick was cool though. Number 11. Farewell, My Turnabout. Game 2, Case 4. I know what you're all thinking. This is probably your favorite case or one of your favorite cases. But unfortunately, at the time when I played through this case, it constantly rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know what it was. Every time something happened, I got angry. I don't know if it's because people were stupid for the sake of being stupid. I don't know if it's because it had the return of Wendy and Lotta again, which are two characters that kind of annoy me a lot because they go out of their way to make things hard for me when I'm trying to find a killer, and they just don't want to help because they don't like me, but really they're just putting someone else's life at stake, not my own, so it makes no sense. I don't know, but the biggest redeeming factor for this case was the villain. Without spoiling anything, this villain was great. And what this case made me have to do about a little over halfway through it made me feel dirty. Oh, it was great. I felt all sorts of emotions when the case flipped on me and I had to do a bunch of things that I didn't want to do, but I had to do them. It was very effective in making me feel dirty, and I think that's what the case was going for, and it really succeeded. Number 10, Turnabout Samurai. Game 1, Case 3. I actually don't want to linger on this case too long because it's fairly simple why this case had the impact on me that it did. Lots of twists and turns, and I highly enjoyed the story that it was trying to tell. However, I hated a lot of the investigation. And this is mostly thanks to Wendy, who was just overused. She was everywhere in this case. Every time I would turn, go to a new area, there she was. And again, she's only there to make things hard for me, which was annoying and, in my opinion, kind of just not funny. Even though this game seemed to swear that she was some comedic relief that we really should be enjoying, I didn't enjoy her. I'm sorry. Number 9, Turnabout Sisters. Game 1, Case 2. There really was nothing wrong with this case, honestly, but there was nothing great about it either. It's a standard case for the series, so having it in kind of the middle of this list is pretty perfect. If I were to think of a negative, it would be that it killed off one of my favorite characters, which later on kind of comes off kind of anticlimactic when you learn more about that character in the games to come. I don't know. It was kind of weird for me to remind myself that this is how they died. Either way, moving on. Number 8 is the first Turnabout. Game 1, Case number 1. This is another fairly standard case, but it being the first one in the series left quite a mark. It was so fun figuring out how cases work for the first time, and I felt so smart and satisfied as this case went on. All in all, again, just like Turnabout Sisters, fairly standard, in the middle, but the placement of the case is really what put it over Turnabout Sisters, just because it's the first case, so it leaves such a big mark on you. Number 7, Turnabout Goodbyes. Game 1, Case 4. This case is as high as it is solely because of its epic story. I am aware that this is another fan favorite, so I'm probably going to have a lot of people angry that this isn't at least in the top 5, but this is how I view it. Von Karma is a great foil and was truly terrifying to go up against in court. However, Lotta was a waste of time and super annoying. You'll notice a trend of my complaints with these cases is the amount of people that waste your time. And it's not necessarily because they waste my time that I dislike them or the cases. It's because of the reasons they waste my time. Lotta's reasoning for me not wanting to get the truth was so annoying and just doesn't make sense. Like, if this was the real world, someone would not be so heartless as to have these reasons to waste someone's time when trying to find the truth behind a murder of all things, putting innocent people's lives at risk. I mean, we're talking life in prison and death sentences. That's important. That's dangerous. It's scary. People are gonna tell the truth when it comes to that sort of thing in real life. I mean, I would hope so anyway. And especially with Lotta's personification, you think she would, but she just doesn't. And that brings this case down so far for me because Lotta is in this case a lot. We get a Lotta. And my god, that's gotta be the worst joke I've ever said out loud. Anyways, the locales were ugly and not nearly as interesting enough for me to have to investigate them as much as I did. And I know I have more negative things to say about this case than the cases that came before on this list, but man, again, the story in this case was that good. It redeems this case and then some, so that is why this case is so high on the list in comparison to the ones before it. Number 6, The Lost Turnabout. Game 2, Case 1. This is kind of where it gets hard for me to order because every case from here on I absolutely adore. The Lost Turnabout had a memorable crime setting, great music, a great defendant, and it was the first case that we get to hear the second game's amazing moderate and allegro examination music, with Justice for All's moderate and allegro examination music being my favorite out of all 3 games in the Ace Attorney trilogy. This case really had nothing bad going for it in my opinion, and was a blast from start to finish. I'll also admit that I'm a huge fan of the cases in this series that don't involve investigations, just straight down to business, and I love it. Number 5, Reunion and Turnabout. Game 2, Case 2. This case was really fun for me. Again, I loved the setting. I loved learning more about Mia and Maya's family and their traditions. The villain in this was pretty damn good, and I felt so smart that I had basically pieced everything together from fairly early on in the case. Pun intended on that, piecing everything together if you've played this case already. I'll admit, at first I was thrown off by bringing the supernatural into the courtroom, but luckily, I had to work around the supernatural happenings instead of with them to justify Maya's innocence. Also, anytime Maya's life is in danger just makes the allegro for Game 2 really shine, and this is the first time we get to experience how the music amplifies that tension. Number 4, Turnabout Memories. Game 3, Case 1. And here lies the absolute closest rankings I have for all the cases. Turnabout Memories is not only straight to the point, with everything starting in the courtroom, but boy, did this third game in the trilogy really throw me off by beginning my playthrough as none other than Mia Fey 5 years ago, defending Phoenix Wright in the courtroom. This took me by surprise, but the game didn't stop there, which I'll go over eventually in this video. First, let's talk about how Phoenix made me so mad in this case, but in the best way possible. Mia was so intriguing to play as. Her connection with the villain was mysterious, and the way this case eventually leads into the rest of the game still gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. This case really stuck with me. It introduces some of the music from the third game, which in my opinion is the most well-rounded music in all of the trilogy. And it gave the moderate and allegro examination music from Game 2 a run for its money. I almost thought that this was going to be my favorite over those, but in the end I still sided with Game 2's examination music. Number 3, Turnabout Beginnings. Game 3, Case 4. Once again, we're put in charge of controlling Mia Fey in a court case. This time, we've experienced a 2-case gap in this third game before getting to see more of a glimpse into the past. This time, we are playing through the case that took place before Mia ever even defended Phoenix in court. In other words, this is the earliest case we'll ever play through in the trilogy. Not only is this another case where we are treated to nothing but the nitty-gritty in the court, effectively skipping investigations and getting to control Mia again, but this is the absolute most effective court case that does all these things. I felt a constant tension in this court case, as I should, but this time it was different. Something about this case seemed off, and I couldn't place my finger on exactly what it was. By the end of this case, several things were clear. Godo's true identity, we now had someone to consider a main villain for the game, and they are pure evil, and that this was the first part of a series of events that led to Mia's eventual death, Godo's transformation into the man he is today, Phoenix's future standing in the defendant chair, and with the lead up at the end of this case, I knew something big was also about to happen. The lead up from this case to the final case of the trilogy genuinely brought me to tears and filled me with the sensation of dread as the case ended on a severely tragic note. Number 2, Bridge to the Turnabout. Game 3, Case 5. As the Turnabout beginnings came to a close, we see the Shichishito, the 7-blade sword of Kurain village. As we draw down every blade that the sword has to offer, we see several familiar characters. And once we reach the bottom of the sword, we see yet another dead body pierced through by the end of the blade. It's at this moment that you know everything is about to come to a head. And I will say, this case was epic. It had everything. Stakes, a satisfying investigation, a constantly compelling narrative, intense mystery surrounding the character of Iris, and just who the victim herself really was. We had the definitive confirmation that this game really did have a main recurring villain, and the killer. Oh, the killer of this case. The way the killer is revealed in this case is the best reveal of a murderer in the entire trilogy. Even better than the killer in Game 2's final case. This case kept me on edge of my seat the entire time. It was a constant thrill. It really was a close call between this case and my number 1 case, but we can thank Larryce, for this one ever so slightly losing out. I really don't understand these games and insisting on characters literally not taking murder seriously. Thank God Lotta wasn't in this case, or it would have suffered from that syndrome Turnabout Goodbyes had. But real talk right now, this case had me feeling every range of emotion. I never wanted it to end. I really didn't. And when this case did end, so did the trilogy. And that was probably the most heartbreaking part about it. Number 1, Rise from the Ashes. Game 1, Case 5. This is really and truly the number 1 case for me. There was no Larry. There was no Lotta. There was no Wendy. There was no character that gave me bullshit for the sake of giving me bullshit. Everyone in this case wanted to help in some way or another, whether or not they thought they were doing the right thing. This case was perfect. It had lovable characters. The Blue Badger, Gumshoe at his best, Edgeworth at his best, multi-layered events, more great music, an even better sidekick than Maya, a mysterious defendant, an intimidating villain, excellent locales, and best of all, extra functionality thanks to this case having been developed with a DS in mind. This was a non-stop, entertaining ride from start to finish. Hell, even when I didn't know what to do next in my investigation, I was having a blast. There was so much depth to this case. I have nothing but fond memories of trying to figure out every in and out of it. It was so long, and yet it didn't drag. What more could I ask for? This really was a perfect case. It will forever go down in my mind as everything the Ace Attorney games can be, and for that, I adore it. All in all, it seems like each game in the trilogy are strong in their own right, and are pretty close to each other in my critical opinion. I have fond memories of all of them, and honestly didn't dislike a single case. I hope we eventually get a trilogy pack of the next few games in the series, as I've yet to play those either. Either way, please let me know in the comments your thoughts on all the cases. Hey, why not even write out for me your own list? And as always, please like and subscribe for more. I also have my Patreon links in the description, and at the time of this recording, I currently have 0 patrons, so somebody please help.